So that narrows the field quite a lot, because most news journalism is not evergreen, for the obvious reason that topics that come up in the week aren't going to necessarily be that interesting 2 weeks later.
Whoa. Have you hit that subscribe button? If not, what are you waiting for? Do it.
Hello one and all, welcome back to Retrospective. It's me and it's Chris, the two usually ugly mugs that you see every week. We're getting worse and worse. Lockdown hair is not so great.
It's not looking good at the moment, boys.
Chris is resembling a toilet brush more and more each week as we go through.
you can see, yeah. But and I've got a new background, guys, as well. By the way, loving life. All the scousers in the comment section enjoy. But today we're joined by a very special guest, the Athletic and Tifo's very own Joe Devine. Have I pronounced it right?
Yeah, good job.
Oh, fantastic stuff. How are you, pal?
I'm okay, thanks. You just reminded me that teachers always used to call me Devine when I was at school. So yeah. Lovely job, Chris. Thank you.
Excellent job. First of all, mate, we're just going to ask the easy question. How is lockdown for you? Are you coping all right?
Yeah, it's okay, to be honest. I mean, obviously Tifo recently became a part of the Athletic, so our working life has changed a little bit. But before that, for a number of years, it was a very small team, and it was mostly just me in an office in Islington in London on my own. So whilst I'm at home now and I'm not in the office, I am very used to being on my own in a room for long periods of time. So it doesn't really feel that much like anything has changed, to be honest. But I have had to cut my own hair.
Oh gosh, crikey! Fun times.
Could be better. Yeah. How about you guys? Everything okay in lockdown?
Well, we're surviving. We're making a lot of these, which really helps. But yeah, Has, really start off the questions that make Retrospective itself.
Yeah, so just give us a sort of a rundown of what you do currently. What's your present day, on a normal basis.
Yeah, sure. So I don't know, it changes quite a lot, to be honest, depending on what projects we're working on. So I run Tifo Football, which is now part of the Athletic. And as a part of that, I spend a lot of time having meetings. I'm more of a facilitator now for the people who get to do the fun, interesting parts of the work. So I'll have conversations with the script writers who are writing the pieces, or with Seb Stafford-Bloor, who's our content editor, who oversees a lot of that. Or I'll talk to the designers who are actually making the videos. So I get to watch them at the end, which is fun. But in terms of my actual participation in them, it's just voiceovers now, pretty much. And yeah, beyond that, I don't know, I host the podcast for Tifo as well, which is fun. We do 2 of those a week. So I get to meet lots of interesting people. This is a bit of a role reversal for me. Normally I'm asking questions, so I'm slightly uncomfortable. But, yeah, that's about it, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Tifo Football, it's quite a unique sort of project in itself. I mean, I've watched it for years myself. I watched it when you were still called UMax at Footballers, I think is how I remember it. It's a very different thing for people who may not be aware of it. Give us a sort of explanation of what Tifo is.
Well, yeah, how do I describe it? I suppose, I mean, we call it sort of illustrated, informative video content. So what we do is we make illustrated, or in some cases animated, short films for YouTube, quite narrowly focused on specific football topics. We cover quite a broad range of themes. We're quite well known for our tactics videos, which are mostly written by Alex Stewart, where we'll try to cover, broadly speaking, the tactics of a team, or a particularly interesting tactical aspect of one team or a player. We also do longer history pieces and stories, and I think part of our forte as well is videos that have a bit of a geopolitical bent. So we like to try and tell football stories from around the world, and as best as we can cover teams and countries, not necessarily affiliated with the Premier League, which is difficult because we're all from England or from the UK. But we do our best there. And yeah, we've been releasing videos. I think we do 4 a week now. We've been doing it for 4 or 5 years. And the channel has gone from strength to strength, and people really seem to like it, which is lovely.
For you personally, Joe, where did it all start for you? Were you always into sort of the video stuff, the writing stuff at an early age?
No, not really. I mean, this started because, so I suppose if I go back, I don't know, 7-8 years, I started a blog with my sister, who has actually recently joined us at Tifo and is our production supervisor now. She had just finished art school, and she was working in a pub, and we were both working in the same pub actually. And she wasn't doing any illustration, and yeah, she said to me that she wanted to do something regularly. And at the time, because I was working in the pub showed a lot of football, and I was into it and watching it with regulars and friends. And at the time, I had maybe an advanced knowledge for a fan, you know. And so I said to her, okay, let's start a blog. As long as it can be about football, I'll do it. And we started that years ago. It's called The Illustrated Game. And that, I don't know, we did that for about a year or two. We started a podcast with that. We met a lot of people through Twitter and on the internet. And eventually, some of the people I met were looking to hire a social media manager. And that was Neil Clerk, who started a company called Umaxit Football, which was Tifo's previous name. And so, yeah, I took the job. In fact, I job shared it with Alex Stewart initially, who left after about two months because he's rubbish at his work. And it went from there, really. I mean, I was doing mostly scheduling on Twitter and, you know, Facebook, and I don't think we were even doing Instagram then. And Umaxit was commissioning a lot of written articles. So Seb was around at the time as well, and there was a bunch of writers who were doing stuff on a weekly basis for us. And one of the ideas was to see if we could try and utilize that material and turn it into videos, which is a difficult thing to do in the football space, as people probably aware, because there are so many copyright issues that you can't really use footage, and essentially, you know, somebody owns the IP for everything. So finding an original way of doing that is difficult. But that's where the idea for the illustrations came from. And so the first, I don't know, sort of 20 or 30, I wrote and made them myself. They're terrible now. I can't watch them back again, but they're still up on the channel. And they just did exceptionally well. And we were all a bit surprised, really. I mean, it seemed like a good idea when we'd started, but I don't think we expected it to do as well as it did. And yeah, I mean, I've gone from there, really.
Yeah, and you obviously started social media stuff. Was it your intention really to become not on the camera but on the video in terms of voiceovers? Is it something that you wanted to do when Tifo started?
No, I just did it because I was the only person. I mean, I was making literally everything, every aspect of the video I was doing. And so yeah, I did the voiceovers at the beginning. And I get, like, in fact, I watched back some of the early ones a couple of days ago. I was looking back through the archive for something, and the quality of the audio as well, and the way that I do the voiceovers is the thing that makes me cringe the most. But no, yeah, it's literally just a case of me being there to do them, and it's sort of blossomed from that. But it's interesting with the voiceovers because it's really nice. We get a lot of positive comments about the voiceover, and people seem to like it. And I think it does something a little different to what a lot of YouTube channels do. It's not particularly passionate. It's not very loud. It's sort of, you know, it really just does the job of explaining what we're talking about. But because I've been doing it for so long, I mean, this is 5 years now of probably recording myself for at least a couple of hours. And if you include the podcasts, maybe 4 hours a week. My voice has completely changed, and I can't. It sort of happened organically, and it's a strange thing, but I can hear myself talking in my head now all the time, and I've adjusted the way that I say words, sort of, you know, in a small way, gradually over a process of time. So yeah, it'd be interesting if there's any audio of me from 5 or 6 years ago to see how different I actually sound. It's interesting.
And I was going to know, you sound pretty much exactly how I've heard you on the video. It's like normally when you have people who do voiceover stuff, their sort of normal speaking voice is different from their voiceover voice, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But have you found you've kind of adopted, I guess persona is not quite the right word, but you see what I mean? Do you feel like you've sort of just become stuck in that mindset?
Yeah, a little bit. Do you know what? I wouldn't describe it as stuck, but I do have a bit of a problem with the podcasts because Tifo, as a, you know, if you'll forgive me for talking about it as a brand, it's sensible, it's sort of quite semi-serious, it's informative. I'm none of those things. And so when I'm doing the podcast, I do struggle not to let my sort of natural self come out, which is to be, you know, slightly more cynical and make fun of everything. So in terms of the idea of kind of being stuck in a persona, I do feel a little bit crammed into sensible Tifo land, but that's probably a good thing, because I think if I let my natural self go, no one would be listening. So,
Well, obviously, you've joined up with the Athletic, which is quite a new platform in itself. And we've had Ryan Conway from the Athletic on previously. How did that come about in terms of that sort of collaboration? Because I know that they've absorbed a lot of different sort of platforms and stuff like that in the way of podcasts. So how did the collab with the Athletic come along?
pretty simply, to be honest. I mean, as you know, they launched in the UK last summer in 2019, and they kind of made waves at the time. They had a lot of excellent journalists, and people were talking about them. And I think, any company with ambition looks at the space and sees what other people are doing. And when they came to the UK, I think thankfully they identified Tifo as an example of a group of people obviously doing something right. And yeah, I think it's a sort of natural evolution of a sponsorship relationship we started at the time. So we did some sponsored videos for them for a while, where we adapted some of their written articles into videos, and that seemed to work really well for them and for us. And yeah, it was a natural evolution of that, really. But it's been great so far. And it's a bit of a big change for us, as I said before. We're a small team, and personally, I've never worked before for a company that has more than 10 employees. So moving to the Athletic has been was a bit of a culture shock initially, but it's fantastic because everyone's so friendly. And if you have any questions, or if you need to get in contact with someone, or if you need an answer to something, there's like one of their employees has the answer for you, and there's a real collaborative feel to it, which is I found to be really enjoyable.
Yeah, and in terms of your view from sort of an outside point of view on the journalistic sense, do you think that their entrance into the UK market has made a healthy impact?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one, isn't it? But I would say, I mean, the one way I would look at it is that their entry into the UK market created, I can't even number the number of jobs, maybe 50, 60, possibly 70 new jobs in sports journalism, which weren't there before. So, I mean, I would say that's probably the only real way to look at it. And when you do, yeah, it's definitely a healthy impact.
Yeah, and obviously I'm a subscriber myself, so I pay the subscription fee. Some people obviously don't like that in terms of the traditionalists. It's got to be free. But what would you say to those people? We asked the same question to Ryan on the first actual episode of Retrospective. What would you say to people who are sort of cynical of the subscription model?
Yeah, I don't know really. I mean, I can understand my, knee-jerk reaction, or my sort of gut instinct is, well, I don't want to pay for anything. Everything's been free. I'm quite a young guy in comparison to a lot of the people who work there, and to a lot of my peers. And so maybe as a millennial, I have a sort of different reaction to it, having been so lucky for such a long time to be part of the Napster generation, But in reality, the real traditionalist view is that news costs money. I mean, we've worked in an industry which is based on advertising for the last 15, 20 years, and that's not stable. And you can see at times, obviously it's a pandemic at the moment, and that's a very, very unusual set of circumstances. But the advertising industry doesn't support journalism at a time like this. And I think, as long as what the offer is something different and something genuine, and with the Athletic it truly is, then I think, of course, people really, if you want access to that level of work, I think you have to pay for it. And to be honest, that's, looking at the way that the industry is moving, that's probably where it's going. I guess the slight frustration on the part of a consumer, and I find this more with OTT streaming platforms, is that now everyone's sort of cottoned onto it at a top level. You end up paying quite a lot to subscribe to various different platforms, which is, again, I suppose a bit of a strain on the bank account, or a bit frustrating. But at the same time, I think, you know, if you put it in context and in perspective, like we've been incredibly lucky for 10 years to be able to pay £5 for Netflix and have pretty much everything. I mean, that hasn't happened at any other point in history, and there's no way it was ever going to last. So I think if we can broaden our perspective a little bit, and if we can accept that when we do pay for something, and we're talking about a very small amount of money as well. I mean, Tifo ran a 50% off code for an annual subscription for a while. It's less than £2.50 a month. I mean, it's less than people will probably pay on a coffee if they live in a city centre. So I think with some people, it's more like the principle of paying for it rather than the actual amount of money, which again is a standpoint that I do have sympathy for. I do understand, but I think, yeah, if we can broaden our sort of perception on that, we'll realise that the last 10 years has been the anomaly, and we're probably going back to a place where we can afford to pay for better journalism, which ultimately can be a better service to communities as well.
Yeah, and obviously you mentioned, you know, the subscription to Tifo now. When you sort of first welcomed that into being a thing, what did you have to do to sort of change your own approach in that sense? So obviously being on YouTube for so long and being free in that sense, you know, did you find you had to struggle to come up with new ideas to justify people, you know, paying that, or tempting people to pay for that essentially?
Well, we're still free, so like everything that Tifo makes is still free online. Do we have to justify people signing up to the Athletic? I mean, yes, that's part of our job, is to try and bring people to the Athletic and show them what's available. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about, well, I mean, you know, for a start, reading a lot of the stuff that is published on the site and trying to isolate the pieces that will have, you know, a wide interest or that might work well in video form. But to be honest, I find that, you know, if you can reach fans of specific clubs, it's not a hard sell because they already want this. You know, if the Athletic are going to cover Norwich City in a way that, you know, only the Eastern Daily Press would have done before, and if Michael Bailey, who worked at the Eastern Daily Press for 15 years or whatever, works for the Athletic now and has the best access and is going to guarantee 3 or 4 excellent pieces on Norwich City every week that you're not going to get anywhere else. And if you can get that plus that level or that degree of access to, you know, pretty much every other sports club in the UK or in America for sure, that's a really really easy thing to sell. Like, that's what people want. People are already paying for that, you know. So I think it's just a case of letting people know that it's there and trying to show them what the quality is. And, you know, the Athletic have a really high rate of retention for subscribers, and that's not a coincidence. That's because when people come on for a free trial, or when people, you know, sign up for the first year, they tend not to leave because they're getting what they want for what's in reality not really very much money.
Yeah, and I think that's the heart. I think it's because it kind of breaks the mold, and I don't think people are used to that, as Chris alluded to before. So like it's a case of showing people that sort of side of it. So with Tifo's more, you know, video related side of that, do you guys sort of see the articles that you'll see on the Athletic and think, okay, that'll work well in visual form? And sort of what's your kind of key giveaways to articles that would be good in visual form?
Yeah. I think it's more the story. So for us, it's how the story is approached, and we try to be quite narrow in our focus. So I'm trying to think of a recent example of something we've converted. In fact, it hasn't gone out yet, but it'll go out in a week or two's time. It's the story of Alan Smith moving from Leeds to Manchester United. And there's a lot to that story, and there's a lot of different people's voices as part of that story, but it's pretty narrow focus. I mean, it's one thing that happened. And we tend to find that, yeah, if we're explaining something in a linear fashion, really that's what a Tifo video is for. That works a little bit better. So we can filter through pieces. I mean, the Athletic does some incredible news work, which is quite broad and which is quite timely. It doesn't work for us because we have a lead time. Maybe it's a week or two before we can get a video out. We can't edit them once they're up either. So our aim, generally speaking, is to try and create content which is evergreen, or, you know, for at least a year or two. If someone comes back and watches it later, that it's still fairly relevant. So that narrows the field quite a lot, because most news journalism is not evergreen for the obvious reason that topics that come up in a week aren't going to necessarily be that interesting 2 weeks later. So that would generally be our approach to it. But yeah, on a secondary level, the design stuff. But there's another one a story about a theme park, which we're going to convert. I think that hasn't gone out yet either, but reading through that story, it's just so obvious that it would make a fantastic one because it's a theme park and theme parks look cool, so we can draw a cool theme park.
Yeah, and for you guys, obviously another link into the current situation. As you create evergreen content, that in terms of other platforms, it probably hasn't affected you as much because the content's still there. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, it hasn't affected us in the sense that we don't have to change what we're doing because we're doing the same thing now. Based on our previous model, if we weren't part of The Athletic, it definitely would have affected us because obviously we relied on advertising to make ends meet at the end of the month, and it would have definitely been a difficult time for us. But yeah, in terms of our content output, it's pretty much the same, which certainly makes life easier. Yeah.
Yeah. And what would you say is your favorite sort of content to make? Obviously you don't actually get involved in the fun stuff as you called it earlier, but what's your favorite content that you like to produce and to put on the channel for you?
Well, I think that, there's two answers to that. One is just the best stories. We did one on Iraq's 2007 win of the Asian Cup, which is it's my favorite video that we've made, I think. Not for reasons of design, although it's fantastic, and not for reasons of the script, although it's fantastic, but because the story's so good, and that's really what people are after as well, is good football stories. So that would be my first answer. The second, I have more of a personal interest in stories that have a bit of a geopolitical bent to them. So we released recently a bit of a profile, really, of Mohammed bin Salman, who's the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia and who is the chairman of the PIF Fund, which are, in a proposed takeover of Newcastle United at the moment. And we work with an incredible journalist called James Montague, who's been reporting particularly on Middle Eastern football for the last sort of 15 years, but all around the world, really. And James has, I think, an unparalleled knowledge of these sorts of events. So when it comes to pieces of content like that, I feel Tifo can really create something which is unique. And in a way, I feel like our video about that man and about that football club takeover is, I don't want to blow our trumpet too much, but I think it's the best coverage of that you'll find anywhere. And that's great because we're a YouTube channel, so it's not really supposed to work like that. So things like that give me a bit of a kick.
Yeah, and one thing I want to touch on in a more personal sort of scenario with what's going on is a lot of sort of media professionals and journalists have obviously had the hits of motivation through this, with sort of being locked inside and stuff, more from a mental aspect. So have you found you've struggled with that at all, or has being? I know you said obviously earlier that you're sort of used to being in a room for long periods of time, but have you found that this scenario's had any mental knock on you at all?
It didn't initially, probably more now. I think I found it harder since the slight easing of the lockdown, or in England at least. I know it's not the case in the rest of the UK, but I don't know. I think that had a bit of a subconscious effect where everyone knew that was coming. That sort of felt beforehand like it might be, the end of the lockdown, even though we knew practically that wasn't going to be the case. So once you get past that point and the realization sets in, it's like, okay, this is going to be a long time now. It's definitely been harder since then, but I'm pretty used to this, as I said. And to be honest, the cool thing about Tifo is that we have 2-week turnarounds for things. So, and because we release 4 videos a week, there's always the next project. And because you have, that 2 weeks, it's not like you have to write it that day and file it and it's out the next day. The shelf life for these things is much longer. And so we can spend more time talking about them. We can spend more time working on them. And it's exciting to follow that through from the beginning to the end. So that's what I like about it, because as I said, I'm not so much part of the fun stuff, in an active sense as I was at the beginning, but I do get to see every video through from the beginning until the end, which gives me a great sense of satisfaction. So yeah, even during the lockdown, that's still happening at a completely unmanageable pace, as the same as normal. So it's definitely something to focus on. And I do feel for people who are furloughed during this time, or who don't have work. or who have nothing to do. In fact, my flatmate spends, most of his time in the house sort of watching telly or reading, because he's a stage manager in the West End, and obviously there's no theatre on at the moment, so he's not working and can't visit anyone, and I'm working all the time, so it's I feel for people like that. I think I'd rather be in my situation than in a situation where I had nothing to do.
Yeah, and again, you mentioned that you sort of stepped away from being involved in the more creative side of the production now. Did you find that hard initially, sort of having been at the forefront of it for so long, and then had to step back and sort of just oversee instead?
Yeah, and partly because the creative stuff is fun, and also partly for, I was slightly embarrassed to say, for ego reasons, because suddenly other people are making the stuff, and your name is on it because I'm narrating the video, but it's actually quite hard. It's theoretically it's harder to see what my impact actually is. So from that perspective, I've got a bruised ego over that still now. But no, from a creative perspective, because it's fun, and what I would like to spend most of my time doing is researching, really. I mean, like I would consider myself to be a writer, and I don't have time to write, and I like doing the longer projects, and I like, we've been trying to make a video about money laundering for ages, and the reason it's taken so long is because I'm doing it. So I've been researching it for like over a year, but that means 5 minutes a week, or so that stuff's fun, and I'd love to be able to have a whole day where no one's going to interrupt me and I can do that, but it's not really possible as a result of my job.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to touch on is Tifo basketball. So was it something that you planned on once you started to get bigger, is to obviously go into other sports and stuff like that, and now obviously it's sort of discontinued a little bit because of lack of basketball on. Is it something that you want to do in the future, is just spread yourself across all sports?
Yeah, I mean, the reason we started it in the first place was just to see whether the model could be applied to another vertical, and I think it can. Ultimately, we actually stopped and started twice. The first time we stopped is because we just didn't have enough time. We stretched ourselves a little bit too thin, and we felt that it'd be okay to leave it for a couple of months and then come back to it. And then we did the same thing again, and stopped for the same reason again. We didn't have time. Because, as I say, we're a pretty small team, and that coincided with us going up to 4 videos on the football channel a week from 3. But yeah, I mean, for the future, I don't know exactly what our plans are at the moment, and obviously there are more people involved in those decisions now than just us. So I don't know that those things are conversations to be had, but ultimately, personally, I would be excited by the idea of trying to cover other sports as well, and I see no reason as to why we couldn't do that in the future. Do you have a suggestion for a sport that we should cover, Chris?
Oh, well, I'll tell you what, we've got one coming up next week. We've got an interview with a Swedish handball player, so maybe you could try Tifo handball. I'm not sure what the stuff will be going on for that, but with the athletic now being involved, do you think that will give you maybe more of a scope to cover different sports in that respect?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that these guys have some of the best sports journalists in the world working on all of those verticals. So, I mean, I cannot think of a circumstance that would make it easier to do that if that's something that we decide to do. I mean, to have these people, a text or a phone call away, or even in ideal scenario, having their actual input in terms of writing scripts and stories and stuff like that for videos. I don't see how it could be done better in any other scenario.
Is there any particular sports that you really want to cover up? Anything that really sticks out to you?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I like basketball, which is one of the reasons we chose that initially. I know that Alex is keen to try hockey, because I think there's a few. I mean, Alex looks at sports in a kind of weird, dry-eyed, robotic way, where he's obsessed with stats and tactics, and he has no passion behind his eyes. So he gets excited by metrics, and there's a particular hockey metric. For the life of me, I can't remember what it's called, but he's been keen to make a video about that for a while. It just doesn't fit on the Tifo football channel, so I think he'd probably be keen on doing hockey.
Fair play. it's obscure, isn't it? It's different as opposed to, it's coming out and saying, yeah, we'll cover boxing or we'll cover mixed martial arts or something along those lines.
But it's an interesting idea because for that reason, I mean, that it's a good point to raise, and this is part of the reason why the athletics model is successful, because what they do is they offer what might be seen by the broader media as niche areas of interest, proper coverage. I'll go back to my example before. Norwich City are not covered in the national media on a regular basis for obvious reasons, right? They don't have the resources all the time, and no one would read about it. But there are thousands or tens of thousands of Norwich City fans in Norwich who are absolutely dedicated to that team. And likewise, hockey probably has a lower ceiling in comparison to the US's bigger sports, but those fans are dedicated, and they'll pay to read things, and they're desperate to read really good writing and watch great videos. And I think if you can kind of cover lots of bases in one go, then that makes sense.
Absolutely,
yeah, for sure.
For you, what do you think is the key for you? Because you found your niche with Tifo. We had Alfie from HITC on as well, who was excellent, and we've had we're going to have Hamill from Football Daily as well, aren't we?
Yeah.
So what do you think that differentiating yourself? Obviously, you have your niche. It's not the typical YouTube thing. Has helped you gain an audience?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's easier to stand out when you're doing something that's different. I don't know. I mean, to be honest, there are a couple of different ways of looking at it. One is that way. Another is that if you make good stuff, people will watch it. And if it can find an audience, and that's one of the things that YouTube used to be better at. Now it's slightly more skewed in the way that it sends your videos to your subscribers, which is frustrating. But anyway, but if you can utilize a platform like YouTube to connect with people who want to watch things, and you make good stuff, people will watch it. And I think, I don't know, I think if you're doing that in the style that HITC are, for example, there's a reason that they have a subscriber base, and that's because they put presumably a lot of effort into the videos that they make. So I think there's space in whatever department, but if you can do that and stand out and do something different, then I guess it makes things easier. I mean, to go back to what I was saying before, we really only created the videos as a means to try and get more out of written work that we already had. So I don't think we were looking at it or thinking about it in any other way other than that. And how can we do this whilst getting around, copyright and IP and stuff like that. So we certainly didn't approach it from a perspective of how can we be different or how can we stand out. I think that just sort of happened as a happy coincidence. And I'm glad that it did.
Absolutely. For you personally, where do you see yourself heading? Is it going to be continuing on this road, on this path? Do you see yourself potentially changing your job? And what's in the future for Joe Devine?
Definitely Hollywood. I think I'm going to Hollywood. Doing some films. I don't know. I have got no firm footing for that, but I have a feeling I'm definitely going to be in some big films, maybe with Brad Pitt or something.
Got the voice, mate. Got the voice.
Thanks. I don't know, really. I'm really happy to do my job now because it's fun, and I like everyone I work with, which is great. I mean, I'm sure you guys will know, and anyone that's listening or watching will know, when you work with people who are rubbish, that's rubbish. So working with great people is, I think, would always be my first aim, regardless of what the job was. So I'm very lucky to be able to do that. So I don't know. I don't have any grand plans, and I'd hate to be, presumptuous in that sense either, because it's a difficult industry to exist in, and we've been very, very lucky in the way that Tifo has developed, and I've been lucky as part of that. So I'm just happy to carry on doing it for now. Yeah, I don't know. Is that a good answer?
Yeah, well, we usually
Hollywood
get the same.
Again. I'll say Hollywood.
We usually get the same because a lot of people are very, very focused on the goals that they set in the short term, and I think I live by that myself as well. Yeah. I think there's no point in dreaming. Well, there is point in dreaming, but there's no point in aiming high like that unridiculously. But yeah, Hollywood's great. Has anything else for Joe?
Yeah, well, it's a question we've asked a couple of people who work in the YouTube space, and I know a lot of people who do content creation on YouTube somewhat dread the title, but do you deem yourself as a YouTuber per se? Inverted comments, of course.
No, I don't. I don't, but for legitimate reasons, not because I'm embarrassed. Although I am embarrassed, but because we don't do vlogs, and because my face isn't on the video, and maybe my voice is a YouTuber, but I'm definitely not. And I don't know. I think also what we do, as you guys have said already, is slightly different to what other people are doing online, or on YouTube at least. So I think I look at us more as I don't know. We're a film production company, really. We make short films, and they happen to live on YouTube, which is a fantastic platform to reach a wide audience. So I will say no, but I don't ever know what to say when people ask me what I do, which is a sort of slight social complication. Maybe I should just start saying YouTuber. Hollywood.
Hollywood. That's the way forward.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Anything else for Joe Haas?
No, that was my last one.
Okay, I've got one more. What would you advise a young Joe coming into the industry with his sister as an illustrator alongside it? What would you say to him now?
You've really made it personal to me by using my name. Young Joe. Don't be afraid of knockbacks, probably, because it's sort of it's kind of horrible when you first start. I was thinking about this the other day, actually. I remember when Alice and I started the illustrated game, and we thought what we were doing was the coolest thing, and that no one was doing anything like it. And maybe we should email the Guardian, and we'll pitch something to the Guardian, doing a kind of illustrated football column every week. And I remember writing the email to whoever the editor was at the time, after spending half an hour trying to find their email address, and just being convinced at the end of it that they were going to email back immediately and pay me £100 a piece or something, which obviously never happened because I cold called them, and we had no internet presence, and we hadn't really done anything to that point. But I remember not hearing back and feeling very dissuaded and feeling very disappointed by it. And obviously we didn't stop, but it felt a little bit like stopping. It felt a little bit like a failure. The reality is, if you're going to do anything like this, and I'm sure that probably includes journalism from other industries as well, although I don't have any real experience of that, people are going to say no more often than they say yes. And like any freelancer that is working is probably hearing no 95% of the time. But it's the 5% that say yes that make the difference and that sustain them. So I think, don't worry about knockbacks. Try not to take rejection personally. It's not personal. When people don't reply to your emails, it's not personal. It's because they're busy and because they hate you. And I don't know. I guess that would have been useful, although young Joe definitely would not have listened to old Joe anyway. So.
Absolutely. Well, that concludes an excellent episode. Thank you very much, Joe, for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No problem. And Haas, any content that's on the horizon?
I was first going to say, if Joe's got anywhere that, any social media that he wants to plug out to us or anything like that, feel free to put that out there now.
You can follow me on Twitter at I can't remember what it is, but just follow Tifo. Tifo's on Twitter. Tifo football _ I think it is.
Yeah, go follow him. Great content. Get subscribed. Get to a mil soon, I reckon. That's on its way. Same for us, really. Drop the subscribe button. Keep subscribing. We've got some decent support in the last few weeks. Keep us growing. Keep the family growing. That's what we want to do. Close us out, Mr. Karim.
Well, especially to the 70% that are watching this that aren't subscribed.
So yeah,
fix that.
Bastards. Subscribe. Anyway, thanks for watching.
Yeah. We'll see you on the next one.